Broadcasting from the commodity capital of the world, Zurich, Switzerland, this is Insider's Guide to Energy.
This edition to Insider's Guide to Energy is brought to you by Fidectis. Go to www.fidectis.com for more information.
Welcome to Insider's Guide to Energy. I'm your host, Chris Sass, and with me, as always, is co-host Johan Oberg. Johan, what's going on?
Hey, Chris. Great to hear your voice again. It's been a while. We took some time off, a week or something. So it's once again great to be back and also back into the country.
Well, I'm glad you made it back into the country, all the craziness going on. It's a little bit hard going between countries these days. From our audience, they probably don't realize we didn't see each other for a week because our shows continue to come out, whether we're hanging out or not. So what's happening in your world? What's going on?
No, I think it's a new year when we record this. It's when we also release it. It's, as always, a fresh start. I always feel it's a fresh start when the new year comes around. I don't know why, if it's a fiscal year, if it's just a lot of new energy comes into it. Obviously, a new season or a new year of the Insider's Guide to Energy. So I think really looking forward to it. And I also, Chris, even though I'm not directly involved in this one, but I'm looking forward to our new miniseries.
Yeah, the miniseries is coming out. There's been a lot of hype about it. There's been advertisements, sponsors, paid promotion. It's been pretty exciting. The turnout's been great. The number of subscribers signing up just for the Each Year On miniseries has been huge. So I'm excited as well. It's 13 hours of content. So it's been a bit taxing on myself being on another show during my, having a day job, doing a podcast and doing a 13-hour miniseries. But I'm thinking the audience is going to love it. It was a lot of fun and it's pretty informative. But let's focus about what's going on today. The main show, what we like to do is we have a lot of energy transition, renewable kind of things going on. And you know that we both work in the energy market. And I'm interested to talk a bit about this guest. I mean, when we did a pre-call, he reminded me of a couple of interviews we had early on. There was a show that I don't think you co-hosted. You were out that time, where I had a Bitcoin miner on the show, where they had these big pods that they put out and they did mining. And he had this premise that energy companies should sell their base load to him. So that was kind of there, and I think there's some similarity to that thinking. Except I think in this case, we're going to talk about not wasting energy in where it goes. That's what I'm expecting to happen today. Any thoughts from you, what you want to hear today, or where you think we might go?
No, but I think the overall topic, as you mentioned, I think it's really interesting and it touches closely to what we had on before. But you know me, I'm always interested also in the business models and how you make business. There's a lot of great new ideas, a lot of new great things, but where's the business models and who are the customers and where drives the revenue? So when I did my little bit of the research before this, there was a lot of things around how does this ecosystem around this work, and that will be really interesting to kind of explore a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think what we're finding as we get into the show now, or a couple of years into the show, right, is just how much room there is in the market and how all these solutions kind of play nicely together, right? So I think about the guy we had on from Tomorrow, and he talked about the energy maps and using compute power smart. We have another guest now coming on today that's going to talk about how to be smart about your compute. I think that's amazing, but why don't we bring John on board the show here and hear it from John so we don't just speculate for an hour?
Good idea.
So I'd like to introduce this show is John Belizaire. John, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Chris. It's very nice to be here. I've heard a lot about this podcast. I've listened to a few of the shows, and I can't wait to jump in.
Well, I'm happy to have you on the show, although I did watch in some of your prep for the show that you had some sort of conversation in a nice cabin doing wine. I think that's better than a virtual presence. I like the cabin and sharing a glass of wine, but I'll settle for having you on the show and hearing what you have to say as well.
Yeah, we even threw in a little, Tetris and,
Jenga. Didn't you have the Jenga thing where you stack it up?
And,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
that
that
was
was
fun too.
that was fun.
Well,
So
it's pretty hard to do with this much room between us, and we're in this virtual environment. But maybe we'll figure it out next time. So.
so
Um,
I have an advantage over our audience. I know your name and I know your company, but they don't know that much about you. So maybe it makes sense to start by who you are, what company you work for, and what your role is.
Absolutely. So again, John Belizaire, CEO of Soluna Computing. We're in the business of helping the world make renewable energy the superpower by using computing as a catalyst. What we do is we find renewable energy plants that are suffering from curtailment, which is another way of saying energy that can't make it to the grid and get monetized goes wasted. We build scalable on-site data centers that consume that wasted energy and convert it to computing at a low cost and a sustainable approach to computing for very specific applications, things that are pausable, batch-oriented applications like cryptocurrency mining, as Chris alluded to earlier, AI and machine learning. And we believe that those types of applications that are batchable like that will be the fastest growing portion of computing in the whole cloud and data center market going forward. And they're perfect applications for solving this problem. And we actually figured it out by solving the problem for ourselves. We started out as a developer building wind farms and wind energy in Northern Africa and Morocco. And we had this issue where our energy was stranded. We couldn't get it to the grid. And we came up with this idea, why don't we just use computers to absorb it? And in that process, when the grid did arrive, we realized that, hey, sometimes while we want to sell the power, we're not going to be able to sell the power. And by solving that problem, we created this whole new business that we now focus on.
So you
Absolutely.
started with a wind farm in Morocco.
Indeed, we did.
It wasn't connected to the grid. So why would you build a wind farm kind of isolated from the grid?
Very good question. And that's what I asked my colleague who asked me to become the CEO of this company. So a little bit about me. I'm not an energy guy, if you will. I actually started my career in the enterprise software space. And so I've been an entrepreneur for about 20 years, give or take. And I was just finishing up a company I was running. My longtime mentor and investor says, I have an opportunity for you, and I'd like you to come in and take a look at it. And I said, as far as I know, your private equity firm only does industrial companies. And yeah, I'm a software guy. Like, how can I help you? And he said, just come down. Look, all I can tell you is it's got something to do with renewable energy and the blockchain. Blockchain I've heard of. Renewable energy, I have don't know anything about. Make a long story short, I go to his office. I'm thinking, I have a lot of respect for him. I'm going to come up with a reason not to do this. And, I'm sitting there and they're explaining this fascinating problem. They've got this giant wind farm. By the way, this wind farm, it's a 900 megawatt facility, site. And it's about twice the size of Manhattan. If you're at the airport in this location, there are only two types of people you'll see. You'll see renewable energy people, and you'll see Olympic winning kite surfers. Basically, people go down there to enjoy the Harmattan wind. Actually, that's the name of the project, because it's just this incredible wind at 20 plus meters per second in terms of wind speed over there. So he's describing to me the fact that they've got this wind project that has the potential to generate lots of power. The country announced a plan to convert its entire energy program from a net importer. So they were, importing energy, gas, thermal type energy. And they said, this is ridiculous. We have some of the best renewable resources in the world. We should be producing our own green power. And so a big initiative was set out. They're going to expand the grid down to that area. And so it's just a matter of time for the grid to be connected. But in the meantime, how do you monetize the site? And they says, we can just put, a data center there that does Bitcoin and other types of computing for the blockchain. and essentially integrate the power plant with the computing as its primary offtake, you know? And they're using all these renewable energy terms with me at the time. And I'm like, I have no idea what you guys are talking about, but this is fascinating, you know? In Morocco, huh? Wow. So over the next 4 years, we work on developing this idea, vertically integrated renewable energy and computing. And what we learned are a few things. Number one, it's really hard to build a power plant because there's a lot you have to do. And number two, there's all these other fascinating problems that come with adding renewable energy to a grid that was powered by 24/7, dispatchable thermal plants, right? That are synchronized to demand. And the issue is when you add more intermittency, suddenly you have more power than you need sometimes, or not enough power than you need sometimes. There's this imbalance that takes place. And we realize that the computing would be a great solution to that problem. And so that's my journey. And so in 2020, we were unable to travel to Morocco. And it was one of these existential situations where we're like, oh my God, we're screwed. How are we going to, get this business to really run, and this is why building plants is hard, because you got to be on the ground, you've got to, meet with administration, etc. And we did figure out that we could take this computing part and really bring it to other power plant owners. We spent about 6 months calling people and interacting with grid operators, power plant owners, and scheduling companies, and said, "Is this problem real? Like, we're having it. Have you had it?" And there was one call where a gentleman actually says, it was a Zoom, and he says, "Can I present?" And he pulled up a graph and showed the problem in a very powerful visual way. See this? This is the curve that represents the amount of revenue we're supposed to make, and this right here is the money we're actually making. That gap, that's your problem, and this solution is clever. So that's the whole journey, and now we have built a very large pipeline and really focused on making this happen.
So your marketing material calls it a 95 billion market opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you break it down. You got crypto, you got pharma, you got graphics, scientific research. So how does this work? Tell us a little bit about what the market opportunity is, and who's that 95 billion opportunity for? Is this for the power producers, or is this for you that you're going to get a nicer yacht next year?
Good question. So the way our business model works is we buy that wasted energy. So when a power plant, let's say you have a 100 megawatt power plant, and up to about a third, most people don't know this, about a third of the power of that plant never actually makes it to the grid. What it's actually able to produce, about a third of it is not monetized. So we absorb that, and we also absorb power from the plant when we need it, and we convert that into a computing resource. So think of it as a sort of a green Amazon Web Services, but a tenth of the cost. And we design it so it's specifically used for applications that are, pausable or can sustain losing the available power. So if you're running a big machine learning application, for example, that model is running, and if you pause that model, you can restart it and sort of pick up from the data on the data corpus where you left off. If you are looking to determine what movie to show Johan next on Netflix, Johan's model can be run this week, or maybe we can run next week. And so what we want to do is basically build an entire network of these data centers in different renewable energy pockets, right, where there's lots of congestion. We place our data centers there, and then we mesh those facilities together into essentially a giant computing cloud. And then now you can come to us and place your job with us. You won't know which facility it's in, but you'll know that we can run it within the time frame you've set, within the price point you've set, and we have a whole series of equipment in the facilities, and Kubernetes software interface, so you can interface it just like any other cloud. But now you're running your application in a environment that is great for the planet, and that's the what we're trying to do.
So if I understand it correctly, and this is where I really kind of enjoy it when the business model comes around. So the renewable energy, okay, we check on that one. There's a spillover. There's a lot of energy that is wasted. You take care of that in one way of doing this. But you're also, I don't know how many employees you are, but in order to also address all the IT or the actual the machine learning companies, the AI companies, the Bitcoin or the companies, that requires some resources as well. How do you mix this? This is kind of two
Yeah,
totally
fantastic.
different kind of operations.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, in our business strategy, we have something we talk about internally as phase one and phase two. The phase one version of our business is very simple. So we convert that energy into one application, and that is primarily cryptocurrency mining. So in the building, you'll see specialized equipment for that purpose. And the reason for that is because, as many people know, it's a very efficient conversion from energy to security of the blockchain. It's a very large market, and the revenue that you can generate allows you to pay back the infrastructure that you've built out very quickly. And so within 3 years, that data center is essentially fully funded. Okay, the building and infrastructure, all the electrical infrastructure and connecting to the power plant. And in that 3 year window, that time frame, we're building the muscle, we're building the actual footprint in order to credibly go to a large enterprise and say, give me 1% of your compute load that has these certain characteristics for my data center. First question is like, who the hell are you guys? And we're gonna say, well, us, we're Soluna. We have like, we want to be able to say we're Soluna. We have like 500 megawatts of, facilities all around the world connected to renewable energy plants, and our whole focus is to go after these applications, and our data centers are ready for you. And so, phase two of our business is when we've built up the software platform we call Maestro OS, which will be focused on this specific these broader markets, and the business development capability, the customer service capability that we need to service these other markets. That's our phase two business, and the goal is to kick off part one of the phase two business this year, and then expand from there into these other markets. So we're going to take a classic bowling pin approach to that $95 billion market, which, by the way, Chris, the market opportunity is the revenue that can be generated on the computing side,
Okay.
and the power side is the cost input to that business, right? So we're buying wasted energy, obviously, at a very low cost. We convert that to computing at a very low cost. It's green, ESG focused, and we go after a very large market, a very small portion of a very large market, which is niche for these types of applications that ultimately will become a very big market.
Makes sense.
So moving into phase one, where you have an
Yeah.
investment, an upfront investment, if it's a 3 year payoff, but it's still a capex investment, if I understand it correctly. Then
Yes.
are you addressing existing renewable asset owners, or
Yes.
are you part of some kind of a PPA scheme when they build new ones, or how does this?
Good. You guys are. I love talking to energy people because you understand all the dynamics. So we remember we're the guys building it from scratch, right? We understand the pain and suffering that comes with that. So we're now focused on going after the existing facilities, because a lot of these existing facilities, they were built, they were forward cast models put together, and they said, like, we're going to see this much curtailment, and then over the next 4 years, for example, one of our power partners saw a 400% increase in curtailment, right? Because there's so much capital. In 2020, there was $700 billion, give or take, of capital deployed to, renewable energy investment, clean efficiency. 2021, the first half, saw a $50 billion increase in that. There's so much capital going into it that you have this situation where lots of power plants show up in the same place, right? Because you want to deploy that capital very quickly. I call it the McDonald's and Burger King problem, right? They all need to find the most efficient location for the customers that they end up across the street from each other, right? Same thing here. You have suddenly lots of concentration of power plants. And so curtailment goes up, and it puts a lot of pressure on these facilities to return capital to their investors, right? And I've learned a lot about renewable energy, and what I didn't know was how uh, complicated and multi-layered these project finance structures are, right? There's tax equity partners, there's equity, there's debt. Everybody's looking for their money, right? So a power plant has to be uh, cashing checks, right? Not writing checks. So when they're writing a lot of checks to get their power onto the grid so that they can deliver their tax credits to their tax equity partners, what we do is we show up and we demonstrate to them using something we call a curtailment assessment. It's like a special service we provide, and we actually review all of their data, we analyze it, and we present to them a revenue optimization plan. If we build a facility of this size here, we'll be able to reduce your curtailment by this percentage and generate additional revenue for you and return this much tax credits for you, right? And then the bigger we build the facility, the more of that we absorb. And, our goal is to basically get it to zero. And so that's the energy side of the business model, if you will.
And so
Now,
okay.
I want to add one more thing. In the process of talking to some of these power partners, who, by the way, are very large IPPs or large infrastructure funds, they're realizing, wait a minute. So what you're telling me is if I have this thing here, it's kind of absorbing my curtailment. So let's say I had a greenfield opportunity or a project where I could see some of that pricing compression happening, more generation growth. This could be a sort of physical hedge for me to some extent, right? I place one of these with my facility from the ground up, and so now we're in conversations with some of the largest infrastructure companies of the world about blueprinting this in uh, from the beginning, which is sort of funny because it's taking us full circle back to where we started 4 years ago. So it's pretty cool.
So So I get the curtailment problem. I get that you go out, you look at projects. We've had other guests on, and we just had Raptor Maps on recently, and they go through the
Mm-hmm.
whole solar life cycle and try to get
Yeah.
people to optimize because they're, as developers don't always hit the plan and the returns they wanted to get on their projects and things like that. Um, we also have a lot of storage, grid scale storage companies that have been on and things like that, right? So as I said in
Yeah.
the opening to the show, I think there's many solutions, and you already alluded to energy is complex, right? It sounds really simple when we're all sitting around talking about how we want to be green and this and that, but there's many levels, and it gets really complex. So how does this play with grid storage? What I think on your website you have some stuff that with Tesla you claim to add some value to some of the plant there. I think it refers back to even the same wind farm you started this journey on. Um, Tell us a little bit how all this plays.
Yeah, I think that what we're creating is yet another solution, right? It's like another quiver in the tools that can be used to bring more flexibility to the grid. So it's altogether very possible that on the same grid you will have renewable energy plants that have batteries attached to them, and you'll have plants that have our modular data centers attached to them. You'll have situations where grid operators actually embed our computing facility as a grid resource for frequency modulation and demand response to help the grid balance and stay more synchronized around the power generation and demand. And so we believe that our technology will coexist with batteries. When you look at batteries and transmission, those are solutions that are available today. They do have challenges. Transmission takes a long time to stand up, and you run into lots of headwinds as you try to, do this across states, for example, and jurisdictions. Batteries have a scaling issue, and they're also businesses. They have to absorb the energy, when prices are low, but then they have to discharge the battery when prices are higher. Sometimes prices never get higher, and that creates all sorts of challenges for the battery. In fact, more and more battery companies we've spoken to a few are hiring data scientists actually to analyze the grid on a continuous basis so they can optimize the arbitrage for that business. What we're doing is a I believe, a direct sort of conversion of the resource, power to X, right? We're taking the power that's unused and converting it to a form that is globally transportable, and that's computing. And so it's just another way to solve the problem. That's why we like to say computing is it's a better battery. It's a better load and battery when you take into account the types of applications we're thinking about.
Well, as a guy that's a technologist and have been in the computing business for my life, I appreciate that. I guess the one thing as a business person that I think of is so you're taking excess capacity, right? But I know from friends that have crypto containers and things like that they're not inexpensive data centers that they put out there. And so what level of capacity, I mean, if you have a resource that's an expensive resource sitting around and you're only using it 20% of the time when the wind is
Yeah.
blowing, above 30 knots or some metric that gives you a lot of extra capacity, how does that math work?
Fantastic. So the way our model works is we place the facility behind the meter. We integrate it with the wind farm. What that allows us to do is two important things, which creates three sources of power for us. The first is we connect into the same substation. And so because we do that, we can source power directly from the wind farm. So we can source all of our power from the wind farm if the wind farm is prepared to deliver that to us. And that includes the curtailed energy and the energy that's not curtailed. And when the wind farm is too small, in other words, our load is bigger than the wind farm, we can draw from the grid itself. And because we're able to do that through the same substation, the grid sees us as a combined resource. And so therefore we can pull power from the grid at a wholesale rate, getting us to our target uptime. We design all of our facilities to be up about 85% of the time. On average, we're seeing 90 plus percent uptime. So the perception that our only source of energy is curtailed energy, perhaps it's just created by my oration, but the truth is we have access to three sources. One is curtailed energy. So we absorb that wasted energy. But because we're netting or combining ourselves with their production, we also can buy what we call subtractive energy, which is the energy that would have gone to the grid. We're absorbing it as a load, but we make them whole financially for that. So they don't lose any revenue, and nor do their PPA counterparties lose the power because it still gets delivered. And then we have grid energy. And we design all of our facilities such that most of our energy is coming directly from the power plant, and only a smaller, let's say 25%, is coming from the grid. And we do a weighted average cost analysis on all of those three sources to create the uptime and target price that we need to get the right experience for all of these different applications, including cryptocurrency. Hope that helps, Chris.
Yeah, it helped. I was curious.
That's great. Out of curiosity, how do you source this? When you start looking at, all right, where do we go after? I read one of your projects I think it was in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Nice video, by the way, as well. Walking through.
Thank you.
But how do you find these? Because if we take the McDonald's and the Burger King example, they're you don't go after specifically one producer. It's usually an area with several, so you can share or kind of take the benefits of it. So how do you source this? Is it
so
how
initially
do you find them?
we were doing outbound. So I tell you, our very first one, a little secret, what we did is we called GE because we had a great relationship with them, in that they were helping us with our project in Morocco, and they had turbines. And we said, hey, we had the same call with them. Is this a big problem? Do you see it a lot? They're like, we have customers that are wringing their hands, and I can tell you exactly where they are. And we said, you can? And they said, yeah. And they said, how would you like, can you give us a GPS location? And they says, well, yeah. And the gentleman pulled up the system that they use because, they provide a lot of the O&M or operations and maintenance services for most of the wind farms and solar plants that they're involved in. And they pointed us to this location in Texas. We reverse searched against those power plants to companies and owners. And we gave this incredibly bright young woman intern, and we says, we want you to cold call these companies. Here's a script. You call them, and we explained to her exactly what to say. And then she says, okay, but when I get them on the phone, what do I do? And I said, let me speak to them. And that was it. That's how we got the first handful. And then from there, we started getting our message out, kind of like this. And we had a big strategic acquisition last year that got our brand out as well. And we noticed that we started getting inbounds now. People are calling us. On our website is a schedule a call button. It says if you have this problem, click this button and schedule a call. And I was fascinated. I was putting it together. The team was like, nobody's going to push that button, John. Now they push it. They push it all the time. So we're getting a lot of inbound. And then the third thing, which is a more strategic approach we're taking, is we don't want the pipeline that we're building to be one-off. We're trying to purposefully architect the pipeline to have certain types of resources. We primarily focus on wind and solar. Location, we look for specific markets. We want to be very globally diversified. And so we have projects in our pipeline in Europe, for example. We have projects in our pipeline that are developing in Asia and in the US. And the way we do that is by thinking about who are the players that build the most projects, right? Who has the largest portfolio, has the most capital, and we go directly to them and try to build a more strategic relationship where we're like, let's try one asset, but we're going to want all your assets, right? If it works on this one, we want all of them, and build a more strategic relationship that's longer term. And that's when we ultimately get to the whole idea of greenfield projects and so forth. So that's how we do it, Johan, those three ways.
So is there demand and unlimited demand for compute? So, right, you got the Amazons, you got the Googles, there's private clouds, there's clouds everywhere these days, right? Some of them are greener than others. Granted, there's other efforts to try to keep things green. So your business model is predicated on continual demand for the cloud. So
yes,
tell us about that.
I think that we have not begun to scratch the surface on that demand. The one thing that we learned, or I learned in the process of building the first version of the company, when you're in the power business trying to sell power, you want to sell it to every different type of entity, including entities that build data centers that are not your data centers, that are in the power trading business. So we spoke to a lot of them, right, as we were trying to develop our power purchase agreement strategy. And there was one conversation we had with Amazon where they literally blew me away. They laid out how they approach, power as a resource. And it became clear that their expectations for the amount of data center infrastructure they have to build for the next decade really is it is only going, it's up and to the right. It's really only going in one direction. And a lot of that is driven by the nature of the applications that are showing up in these data centers, right? Like at first, you had cloud really being driven by startups who couldn't afford to build their own IT operations. And the second wave was large enterprise, basically converting, like, we don't need to be in the IT. We don't need to build data centers anymore. Like, that's not a core competency. Other people can do that. This third wave is really about, tech-enabled companies. Just about every company is built around data analytics, and the amount of data we are producing, analyzing, and using to drive new applications is exploding at a rate that is very hard to quantify. But I can tell you that it's limitless. And so what we're doing is we're not building a business to go compete with that. Like, I'm not trying to build another Amazon where I'm going to, take all of your compute load and say, forget about Bezos. Which, by the way, I had a dream about him this week. It was kind of weird. I dream he's like, it's like one of those James Bond things. I'm at a cocktail and he shows up and he's wearing a tuxedo. I don't know why he's wearing a tuxedo. And he's talking to me. He's like, yeah, John, I heard about what you're doing and stuff like that. It's very interesting, let's talk about it. And then the rest of the dream, we're like doing all sorts of stuff that, shouldn't be discussed on a podcast. But then I wake up and I'm like, man, maybe that is what we're doing. But The point I'm making is there's a slice of his business that's focused on these types of applications that people aren't really thinking about. Actually, when you go to Amazon, there's this new spot business where you can sort of, grab a resource that otherwise would not be used, that can be used for these types of quick applications that you can run and put them to sleep and so forth. And that's a signal. We also see young companies that are being formed where they build a building and then they put a bunch of these GPUs, and people can go and rent the machine to do gaming, trading, all sorts of applications, and they're paying a lot of money per hour to put it there. And there's spot also. Hey, I might pull this from you. So there's all sorts of signals that this slice that's inside this giant enterprise can be a giant enterprise on its own. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're going to start really small, almost in a innovator's dilemma style, like, come up from nowhere. And, suddenly I guess I'm at a cocktail with Bezos and he's like, hey, I don't work at Amazon anymore, but I heard about this thing.
Nice.
So
all right. So you're
that's what
bullish
we're
about
hoping for.
compute. You're
Yeah.
bullish
Exactly.
about the growth of the market. You mentioned something we spend a lot of time talking about are PPAs.
Yes.
And you also mentioned that you're trying to get into projects from the beginning and that you sit and you actually consume. So are you doing PPAs with some of your customers then? Are you pre-purchasing the power for some of this ahead of
Yeah.
time?
So the partnership we form, or the way we construct the partnership when we're behind the meter, there is a PPA between the power plant and our computing facility for that curtailed energy. In certain markets, there is a retail service entity in between us for regulatory reasons, but ultimately there's some sort of sale of power that's happening between those two entities. In the greenfield approach, the idea ultimately is that the power plant and the compute might actually be owned by the same fund or company or infrastructure player, right? So the computing arm of that large PE firm might own the data center, and then the power plant be owned by the power team, and then there's a PPA between the two of them. And if we're successful, in my opinion, uh, the existence of the data center will actually be the linchpin for the project being built, thereby creating additionality. I guess that's a term that we're using now to sort of describe the fact that our PPA makes it possible. I would love to be synonymous with additionality. And to be honest, on the African continent, that was the biggest thing that just perplexed me. That you have, all these countries that have incredible renewable energy resources. But if you just look at solar PV, for example, if you look at Africa, I think the number represents about 1% of like global PV or something like that. Even though they have most of the sun on the planet, makes no sense. And if you just 10x that, it not only would make them a big player in the renewable energy space, but you would have it would have a pretty significant positive effect on the sustainability of the continent and several of these countries, and the economics, right? We all know, or perhaps some of the listeners don't, but there is a direct, powerful relationship between energy and economic growth. If if you have there's a few graphs out there you can go find where the biggest countries use the most energy, and that's because they need the energy for that growth. And so what we realized in Morocco is the more power that became available, the more growth the country can enjoy. So there's a lot of countries where they can't convert those resources into economic growth unless investment comes in to build the power plants. And so by having our computers there, we think we can catalyze that. That's what's exciting to me. It's what, gets me jumping out of bed every day.
So moving forward, if we look forward a couple of years, we see innovative companies coming around in many different ways. We had a lot of them on the show.
Yes.
Is there a risk? Maybe an opportunity, depends on how you look at it. But do you see that there is more of a combined approach moving forward in the next couple of years when you build a new solar or new wind park, where you basically put the PPA on, including all the investments needed? So you would have the solar, you would have the data centers. You would have a battery storage or a mine storage we've
Yes.
been discussing as well. There's a number of things, of course. And then that is run then by the investors or by you, or how do you see this? Because it's it's a little bit
The answer
siloed
to
right
your
now, I think.
question is simply yes, and I really hope that we make that happen. That's why we exist. We want that to be true. That we want to change the way renewable energy is built. We want the developers to rethink. It's not just a power plant; it's a new uh, digital infrastructure that you're building. You are creating power and uh, grid flexibility at the same time. And in terms of structuring, which is all about energy is all about structuring. That's one of my key learnings. In terms of structuring, that power company, they're experts in power and project finance and operations. They're not experts in computers and software and getting customers to get their compute load. We're experts in that, and so we would provide all of the expertise in a turnkey fashion, right? We build, structure, and operate these facilities, and basically white label it. So to them, to their investors, it's all one unit, right? They have the wind farm or solar farm. Perhaps they have a Tesla battery or some other advanced battery system, and they have a Soluna modular data center, and that's all one project. And then inside that project company, there are three companies actually doing the work of making that a reality.
So let's assume, or you've got the technology, so you're the computer experts, you're the data center experts. So tell me what's special about your data centers. What unique things take place to build a data center that's going to go sit in Kentucky and sit in Europe and
Great.
sit in some other climate? And
Great.
what makes these data centers special?
So I'll crib from my CTO. He likes to say, the data centers that the Facebooks, the Amazons of the world build, they're more like race cars, and they're built to be fine tuned, 100% on. Our data centers are built more like trucks. They're built to be rugged. They're built to be modular, so you can place them in the specialized configurations and connect them like Lego blocks, so you can build a very large facility without having to build a large monolithic, highly redundant building. Traditional data centers spend a lot of time investing in cooling and airflow and raised floors and all sorts of very tuned systems. Today, they still have very large diesel generators in the back, and a lot of them are converting those to batteries now. Whereas our facilities are more lightweight. We use a proprietary thermal design in the facility that moves air at a really high speeds. We have a electrical design that's highly flexible, and you can see some of the video on our Sophie facility, for example, where we describe how we've designed it so we can put all sorts of machines. Remember, phase one, phase two. So first we have one type of machine. Phase two, we're going to have a more diverse type. You don't want to have to re-architect your whole electrical system in there. So we designed it using some traditional methods from manufacturing to allow different types of equipment in there. And they're very power dense. So one building, and we don't use containers. We actually build physical facilities, and we prefabricate them so they can be shipped anywhere in the world and then put together kind of like a IKEA style system to build them out. And those facilities can consume 1.2 megawatts of power per building. And so they're specifically designed to absorb a lot of energy because some of our partners have lots of energy that they need to monetize. And so, for a 50 megawatt facility, I might have 40 of these things, 44 give or take of these facilities on this very wide area. which is easy to do because wind farms and solar farms, as you saw in our plant in Morocco, usually are in very far away places with lots of land. So it's perfect from that standpoint. And our facility was designed to survive in a Moroccan desert that's very windy. And so they really are rugged. Our CTO came out of building radar systems for Lockheed Martin and the military. So he was all about building data centers you can place in the field, and where you can change out disk drives while you're getting shot at. So we've used a lot of that learning to design our facilities. So they're a different beast, if you will, than a traditional data center. Thanks for asking that question, Chris.
So 2 questions then that come to mind.
Yeah.
One's just simple yes, no, probably. With all the
Yeah.
chip shortages type things that you read about, you've got this business plan that's predicated, and I think your one phase is have this cryptocurrency type mining type stuff going on.
Yes.
And there's been a bit of spike when you can get the equipment. How has that impacted your business?
So we have we're very innovative here. We have formed a series of partnerships that give us access to equipment through untraditional ways. Is the easiest way to describe it. There always seems to be equipment. It's just a
Is
matter
that
of
why you
knowing
need to
where.
run when people are shooting at you at your data centers?
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. Um, there always seems to be equipment. It's just a question of finding the right supply chains to get them. And what we've learned is, because these in the crypto space, these products are so concentrated, but there's a lot of demand for it. It's very difficult for the OEMs to build very large customer facing organizations to sell equipment to everybody in the world. So instead, what they do is they do um, a very small subset of very large deals with lots of players, and some of those players are very big distributors, and we've found some of those and developed relationships with them. So yes, when you call Bitmain, they'll say we don't have any more machines. Well, that's because they sold
Because
hundreds of
you have
millions of
them.
dollars to this distributor because they don't want to have to build a big sales organization. But we know who that distributor is, and we've built relationships with them. So that's one way. The second way is beyond the big, well-known players in the space. There are some smaller, very exciting new players that are out there that are building capabilities um, and systems, and they're ramping up very quickly. So the world will become a lot more crowded, I'd say, in terms of OEM access, and we have forged strategic relationships with those. So that gives us access to equipment too. And then there are other ways, but I'm not going to give away all of my secrets here, Chris.
No.
But the point is that we like hard problems here, and the solution to hard problems is just clever ideas, I guess.
All right. Well, we're starting to bump up against time, but I have one more question before I let Johan ask his last question here because I said I had a
Okay.
couple.
Yeah.
So when you say we, how big is we? And then
Okay.
do you have an OS that you created for these data centers? Are you a software team that's managed? I mean, you said you manage the data centers, but I have to get my jobs to you somehow, and it's got to be managed and moved around. So are you a
Right.
software company as well? And then how big
Yes.
is that team?
Yeah. So we're small as a company now, having merged with the public company last fall. We're now growing really, really fast. I think I changed my LinkedIn to hiring, the day after our announcement. So we're about 30 people now, and we expect to triple in size by middle of next year and double in size every year from there would be my projection. And the company is a combination of software people. So we're building an R&D lab in Boston that will be focused on our network, being our network operations center, our triage facility, and our software team. So we're building a whole team that's going to build the Maestro OS platform, which is our proprietary platform for managing our facilities, controlling them in an automated way, and also becoming this job management platform. And the last piece is this meshing capability where we can move the jobs around. So yes, we are a software company, not in the sense that we sell packaged software, but just like any company, every company is really a technology company at its heart at this point, right? So we're going to have that. we're going to have we're going to need to have a ability to really analyze energy markets, right? So to decide where we go put these facilities down, how we structure the pricing, and where we move jobs to, depending on what's happening to the energy flows. So there's lots of interesting innovation to be built out as we grow the business, and so we're pretty excited about that.
Cool. Johan, I'm going to leave it to you to ask the last question or so.
Great, thanks, Chris, and once again, thanks, John. It's been really, really interesting, and I learned a lot. And as I said, that's the reason I'm on the show, to learn. But I have one question, which kind of goes off the topic a little bit. But you mentioned in the beginning that you were meeting your mentor or your new boss and saying, have a look at this. You didn't know anything about the energy industry. I come from the same background. I came from the software industry and the telecom industry, stumbled into telecom, and I felt like I was out of my depth. I had no idea what people were talking to in the beginning, and then you start learning. So what was your first impressions? Yeah. What was kind of the biggest clash or the biggest eye opener once you got into the energy industry?
Yeah. It reminded me of the insurance industry. So I prior to this, I had another one of those, slam into a wall. Like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. It's huge. It's huge. The energy industry is a quiet giant. I mean, if you think about it, we sort of take for granted electricity. We plug our lights in, our light bulbs in, our computers in, it just like works, right? But people don't understand all of the complex pieces that have to go into that, right? You have to have law frameworks, you have to have grid infrastructure to move the electrons, you have to have a way to entice power plants to be built, and you have to have an entire financial structure to build something that costs hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, the cost is coming down a lot now, which is very exciting for green power. But this isn't like a $5 software SaaS platform, pay 1 month or pay or buy for 1 year, get a 20% discount. This is like billions of dollars you've got to put down, and the power plant has to return capital and money, cash and capital for 25, 30 years. So the thing has to be around. Those things got to spin in Texas. And so complexity would be the other one, right? Yeah. How complex the industry is. And I think the third is how ripe it is for innovation. It's really somewhat brittle. It's kind of old, and there's a lot of aspects to the industry that could use a little fresh thought. And I get a lot of the John. When I was getting started. I would say, oh, well, how long is it going to take? We can start working on this PPA, and this is how long is it going to take? Well, I think we should probably be able to get it done in about 6 months. 6 months? I could build a whole company. Are you kidding me? They're like, well, John, that's really fast, Yeah. And so now it's like, no, that can't be done. We can't do that, And that's just like my favorite. That's just like my favorite response to something that I propose. Okay, well, let's go see how we make that happen, because the industry is just really ripe for it. So it'll be exciting to see what happens to the energy industry, in the next 1 to 2 decades, when more and more non-industry people come into the space and just bring all sorts of different technology and perspectives and just a fresh look to how to expand what is globally a very important asset, right? A very important industry.
Well, cool. Well, I've been excited about this interview. I was looking forward to it. I enjoy meeting you. Any idea about how much carbon you guys help reduce by this model? Do you have any projections of how much carbon you're saving the planet?
We don't have that. We're putting together our whole ESG program. It's hard to do because obviously we're building a facility. We're absorbing wasted energy. I think the way to look at our business is 2 ways. In the greenfield case, right, you've got this additionality piece. In the existing plants space, the way to think about it is we are allowing the grid, because we've added this buffer, right, this sort of retroactive buffer to the grid. You can build more green power plants. So to some extent, we're increasing the RPS percentage their renewable energy penetration percentage in a location because we exist. And that will allow them to retire gas-fired generation and traditional coal plants, which reduces carbon. But I can't give you a, exact, metric tons that we produce as a result, or
No worries.
avoid
I just
as a
kind of
result.
curious about that, but it's been a fun journey conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm hoping you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Johan seems to have enjoyed it. You can see by his expression if you're watching us on YouTube. It's been a fun conversation. Thank you, John.
Thanks, guys. This was great. Love the questions. Really insightful, and gave me an opportunity to tell more of our story and share the exciting things we're doing here. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And for our audience, you spent another hour listening to Insider's Guide to Energy. As you heard in the beginning of today's show, there's a ETRM mini-series coming out, so don't forget to listen. If you have any interest in risk management and energy trading, please take a listen to the ETRM mini-series. And if you've enjoyed this show, please like it, follow us, subscribe, and we will talk to you again next week.